From the heart of Maine, this is the DuView Podcast.
All right, and welcome to this week's episode of the DuView Podcast. I am your host, Du, a.k.a. Ryan Dumont, and this week we are continuing my series on my hometown or the city of Augusta, Maine. A couple weeks ago, we had Augusta, Maine Part 1, and in between we had a guest here, Mr. David Hastings, coming on to talk about the Cara auction. So just going to quickly touch on that before going full into Augusta, Maine Part 2 here. So that being said, the Cara auction is going to be June 4th. As I said in the previous episode, doors open at 5 o'clock. It's at the Augusta Civic Center in Augusta, Maine. Bunch of different auction items there, guys. Tables and chairs and all those good stuff. You know, seats. You can buy seats, and those some should still probably be available. Yeah, it's a fantastic event. As I said in the previous episode, it benefits the Cara Sports Complex in Augusta, Maine, and helps them basically, again, volunteer-run organization, helps them maintain, or us, I'm a member myself, helps us maintain the complex for, youth sports in Augusta. Again, private, all volunteer, not funded by the city or the government. So this is one of the ways we keep our fields lined and, the doors open, so to speak. So like I said, June 4th, 5 o'clock at the Augusta Civic Center in Augusta, Maine. Fantastic event, Cara Sports Field Auction for the kids. So be sure to check that out, guys. But switching gears here and getting into the whole reason, the main reason of the episode anyway, is Augusta, Maine Part 2. As we left off in Augusta, Maine Part 1, we talked about the city's founding, the first people to even come to the area, basically during colonial times and even before with the large Native American presence in the area being known as, Kushnok. The Abenaki having a strong presence in this area, and then eventually conflicting, as white settlers moved into the area and started taking land and claiming things that they felt were theirs, but the natives obviously felt the claim to because they were there first. But that's all history, and folks know plenty about, the treatment of Native Americans in the United States or whatever, and that just adds to it. But and it's still a point of contention today. If you look outside the window here in the state of Maine, there's still talking about tribal rights and tribal sovereignty is a term that gets thrown around a lot recently, and so those things haven't gone away. They're still very much here. So these things, I talk about these things as if they're history, but they're really still relevant issues today. Just because I mentioned that there was disagreement between Native Americans and white settlers in 1700 doesn't mean there still isn't disagreement, regardless if one's group's called the settlers or we're both called citizens now. So that stuff just doesn't go away. So that being said, talked about Augusta's founding, the role Augusta played Maine and Augusta played in the American Revolution, and then eventually on to the Civil War as a staging ground for the main divisions of Union troops that were going to go off, and how Augusta eventually became the capital. After Maine becomes a state officially in 1820, by the 1830s, Augusta, Portland is no longer the capital. Augusta is, and so and it started to drive towards the foundation of modern society. In the last episode, talked a little bit about mills and production, which I'm going to go into a lot of detail today because it's a huge part of this area. And so basically what you have by the year, late 1800s, you have Augusta moving away from the, rough and tumble frontier town or the frontier city, into the, at the cusp in a lot of ways of the Maine wilderness, because outside of Augusta there weren't as many big cities at the time with population centers and whatever. So things have changed quite a bit. Even just the surrounding Augusta area, and I'm talking late 1800s, early 1900s. So almost 200 years of 100 plus years of change. So that being said, the 19th century brought major accomplishments for the Augusta area. As I mentioned before, the Kennebec Dam, we had the incorporation of banks, Kennebec Savings Bank, for example, being one of the longest running institutions in the community, theaters, the arts, and new schools even. So Augusta was really moving towards modernization in a lot of ways by the late 1800s, early 1900s. Lumber mills and grist mills were major business, with textiles, paper, and shoe manufacturing following over the 19th and into the 20th centuries. The thriving downtown, mid-century, burned in 1865, but the brick and granite structures we see today quickly replaced the devastation. Irish and French Canadian immigrants came in the 19th century, bringing their skills and labors to build the dam and to run the factories and the mills. And so we see Augusta, again, move from the rough and tumble frontier town or frontier city into a more modern city. And this comes with, immigration, new types of people, new cultures being introduced to the area as well, like I talked about in last episode. And again, another thing to note with Augusta, the downtown, there's a lot of fires. There's a bunch of, it used to be all wooden structures, and there used to be apparently a lot of grandiose and other things that just aren't in Augusta anymore because of the various fires. Even in more recent, within the last 30, 40 years, with some of the fires they had in the latter half of the 20th century, there was, things that were lost that were never rebuilt or what have you. So that being said, fires do play a huge role in Augusta's downtown history as well. So that's a good important thing to note. But speaking of architecture, grand buildings, public and private, religious and secular, were built in downtown along the major thoroughfares. Esteemed architects Francis H. Fassett, John C. Spotford, and John Calvin Stevens designed many of the structures. And prominent local architects George G. Stevens, John C. Tibbets, Charles Fletcher, and Arthur Wing contributed to the city we know today. And so Augusta, as I said, is modernizing. The economy is also, then the prosperity of the area is dependent on one thing, and that is manufacturing. The biggest economic draw for the Augusta area was manufacturing. And so, it's really important to know, and that's why I'm going to spend so much time talking here in this next section of the episode on the mills and manufacturing in Augusta, because that was really the lifeblood of this area. And as I'll note a little bit later, when the mills go away, it creates a huge change for Augusta. And I'll share a few of my thoughts later on in the episode about where our forefathers, those of us that live in the Augusta area, our former community leaders and business owners and whatever, led us to, where we are today in a lot of ways. And so I'll talk about my thoughts on the whole, the whole scheme of things later. But, now is our specific section here on the mills and manufacturing in Augusta. One of the major mills in the city of Augusta was specifically the Edwards Mill. And this mill would change hands a few times over its history, but it would really be an integral part of the Augusta community. And so there's a page here in Augusta, Maine on Facebook that is called Augusta, Maine, A Capital Happening, and they've dubbed the Edwards Mill as the mill that built Sand Hill, being the French Canadians, or used to be the French Canadian section of town, where St. Augustine's Church is up in Augusta, referred to as the Hill, Sand Hill, etc. So it was home to the French Canadian immigrants that came down from Canada and Aroostook County. And that being said, it also not only was the home for a lot of the people, but it also was a place of work for all these people. And as I said, the mills popped up around major river communities where they could use the river power to power their large manufacturing machines. And so the Edwards Cotton Mill, this is from Augusta, Maine, A Capital Happening. Edwards Mill, Cotton Mill specifically, was founded in Augusta, Maine in 1845. In 1868, it was purchased by Sprague Manufacturing Company, and in 1883 by the Edwards Manufacturing Company, which greatly enlarged the plant. And it employed about 2,000 persons and became a major producer of clothing during the Second World War. In 1945, it was purchased by Bates Manufacturing Company, and then was redubbed or renamed the Edwards Division. Later buildings were purchased by the Augusta Development Corporation in order to prevent the company's closing. In 1973, the mill again was purchased by Edwards Manufacturing Company, a division of Miller Industries. Plant was destroyed by a fire in 1989, but the land adjacent to the dam was held by Edwards until 1999, when it was transferred to the state in order to restore the Kennebec River fishery. And the unique thing about this mill and the surrounding area is it occupied like 17 acres of land on the western side of the Kennebec River. And as I mentioned, the mill was a huge proponent for the economic prosperity of the area. For example, during World War II, employment reached over 3,000 people. and ran in 3 shifts. So the mill literally operated all day. It didn't close down. The mill was so large that the building covered, as I mentioned, 17 acres, and the mill workers were also responsible for keeping the Edwards Dam free of debris. Springtime was especially difficult to keep the dam clear of any major debris. Actually, fun story. So my dad, when he was, I think, all of it, 17, 18 years old, right out of high school, actually worked at one of the mills cleaning out the nets and the dams and the intakes from river eels. And they would actually, guys from Japan and stuff would come and literally buy the river eels from people. It was crazy. It's like a little weird little tidbit there, but like I said, the dams and the river were the major suppliers of power. Manufacturing at the Bates Edwards division, so this being the Edwards mill later on when it was repurchased a couple times. In 1983, left a skeleton workforce of 50 workers, and later on in 1984, its doors would eventually close. A massive fire destroyed the cotton mill on November 30th, 1989. The fire burned for the entire first week of December. So again, the building was lost later on, and so as things changed, manufacturing left the country or even just the area, it also had an adverse effect on the Augusta area in general. Directly across the river, and so on the other side of the river, on the east side of the river now, was the Hudson Pulp and Paper Mill, which faced the cotton mill. The paper mill had several owners over the decades. In 1938, the Kennebec Pulp and Paper Company, Hudson Pulp and Paper in 1972, and the Statler Tissue, which closed in 1995, the most recent holders of that area. And also, another manufacturing later on was the Kirshner Meat Processing Company, started on Water Street in downtown Augusta in the late 1920s. As their business grew, the plant moved to Bangor Street on the east side of the river. It's now where the new O'Connor's, or their big brand new dealership is, on that corner there on Bangor Street. On the east side, they employed 2 to 300 people. And that being said, I actually went to school with one of the granddaughters of the Kirshner meatpacking family. So the family was still very much in the area, and they had a huge, impact on the economic prosperity. Kirshner hot dogs, if you've heard of those used to be made right here in Augusta, Maine, anyway. And also another huge industry for this area was shoe manufacturing. Shoe manufacturing histories were were presented here or, held by, for example, Taylor's Shoe, which stood on the west side of the river next to the old Fort Western, near the old Memorial Bridge now. And so, wood, pulp and paper, the lumber industry, textiles, cotton production, the making of textiles, not cotton, like growing the cotton, but, refining the cotton down. And, eventually, the meat industry and shoes were, going to be the big economic driving engines for the Augusta area. And so it came as a and this is just my opinion. It came as a blessing and as a curse. And I'll get into that in a little bit. Once we get into I'm going to go over a little bit of a timeline here in just a couple of minutes and just kind of go into greater detail about the area and what the effects that the mills had on the area in a lot of ways. And so with economic prosperity also came some other not so great things, but it also made the area very dependent on these economic sectors. And so I'll get into this in a little bit, but we're going to dial things back a little bit here, take a step back from the manufacturing and talk a little bit more about Augusta in the greater span of the 1900s here. So as mentioned, Augusta continued to develop, and so by 1900 we hit a population of 11,683. By 1901, trolley service extended all the way out to Togus, that being the Veterans Home on the outskirts of Augusta, Veterans Hospital. 1902, local trolley line became the Augusta, Winthrop, and Gardner Street Railway. In 1904, the most disastrous fire since 1865 started at the Minoan Hall and swept to the east side of Water Street. So as I mentioned before, the fires continued to rear their head and required the folks of Augusta to build and rebuild. And it was also interesting, too, at the time in the early 1900s, as, you have businesses being burned and coming back on Water Street. Water Street also served in the early 1900s, and I'll get to this a little bit later as we get to the later 1900s, but the Water Street, the downtown, played an integral role, as it did in a lot of small town communities as the center of life. It was the center of business. It was the center of, the post office was down there. All your major community needs used to be in the downtowns. And eventually that would change as you get into malls and as the cities would build out from themselves. But in the early 1900s, everything went through downtown. And so, you hear Water Street a lot over this, the next couple minutes of the episode. That's because this is where the integral heart of the city, and then eventually, like I said, as we get into the later 1900s, this changes. But what I was getting to, want to talk about here in the 1900s, they used to literally have like the circus come through downtown Augusta. It would be like going to the parade. You would watch the elephants and all of the circus animals, and I know people have various thoughts on circuses, but regardless, they literally watched the circus go down the street. It was quite a spectacle. If you walk downtown, they have the Museum in the Streets series during the summertime. They have like placards that you can walk by and read about various parts of Augusta history. And they have one of the, talks about the fires, obviously, but they also have one when the circus used to come to town and go through. I can't remember what group or outfit it was that, brought the circus to town, but it was very much like you'd see in the old cartoons and whatever, and so, or the old newsreels and different things like that from the early 1900s. And so this all took place in downtown. So by, let's see here, 1906, the city of Augusta was added the Eastern Steamship Company to the Kennebec line, and also the Augusta Yacht Club was built. I didn't know we used to have a yacht club here in Augusta. Guess times are quite different now. 1907, an attempt to move the state capital back to Portland was unsuccessful. Suck that, Portland. 1910, the population was up to about 13,000 people. The State House was completely remodeled, and a wing was added to the post office downtown. By 1911, an act declaring Augusta to be the perm of government was adopted by the legislature. In 1914, the YMCA building was erected. Now, this isn't the location where the YMCA sits today. By any means, this was over by the Lithgow, across the street from the Lithgow Library, which is, I believe, now just an empty lot now. But that was the old YMCA building. 1916, Pleasant Street, St. Augustine's Roman Catholic Church was erected. In 1920, the population was about 14,000 people. The Blaine Mansion became the official home of Maine governors. The Blaine Memorial honoring James G. Blaine was dedicated, the legendary Maine politician. Hartford Fire Station, a gift from the George Hartford family, was completed. That's the big brick fire station at the top of the hill going down to Water Street in downtown Augusta, for those that don't know. Recently, in the last handful of years, has been remodeled and still is, like I said, the operational firehouse, main firehouse for the city today. Let's see here. In 1921, assisted by his father, William H. Gannett, Guy P. Gannett restored Fort Western and presented it to the city. As I had mentioned earlier in the previous episode, Fort Western was again the anchor point for the community. It was the protection point, and then as we got into the 1900s, we didn't have a real care for history and preserving things, and so Fort Western kind of fell by the wayside in a lot of ways, and it was even turned into like tenement housing for mill workers. There was just no regard for the structure and the significance it played, and so this was going to change, and so he did this as a memorial to his mother, Sadie Gannett. So that was a nice thank you, so thank you to the Gannett family for keeping Fort Western a part of the city's history. Let's see here. By 1923, May floodwaters caused extensive damage. Downtown Augusta has been prone to flooding from the Kennebec River in the spring, including the Great Flood in 1987, which affected many communities, all the way up from Millinocket down to the southern part of the state. My dad was up in, I believe, Millinocket at the time and couldn't make it. He told me stories, couldn't make it home. During the flood. And if you look at some of the buildings in downtown Augusta and even downtown Hallowell, you can see where the water lines were up on the buildings for many a days at a time, which is kind of crazy. And so I know we're in the 1900s, but again, similar to fires, floods have played a huge role in the city's DNA and the community and how we react to things. And so, unfortunately, every spring you do have to worry about flooding. Like there's a lower parking lot in downtown that sometimes you can't even park in. And also, if you have one of those lower businesses, you also have to worry on the, guess it would be on the east side of the street there. So it's definitely a concern as well. So again, I just had to mention the Great Flood of '87 along with this other Great Flood here back in 1923, as they're both very interconnected here. And so in 1924, we had the first clinic for crippled children was opened at Augusta General Hospital. In 1925, the Fuller Field Memorial Fund in Homestead was given to the city for development as a home for self-sustaining girls. In 1926, the new 10,000-gallon reservoir was built, and the Kennebec Legion Park was also dedicated. In 1927, St. Mary's Roman Catholic Church was constructed. In 1928, Macomb Playground was presented to the city by Mr. and Mrs. Georgie Macomber, RP Hazard Shoe Company was also located in the city in this year. 1930, the population hit about 17,000 folks. Ghaniston Park was declared a state game preserve and bird sanctuary. The city voted for a $50,000 completion of the Coney High School, and it was dedicated later that November. Now into 1932, motor buses replaced electric cars. The first radio station, WRDO, was the first in Kennebec Valley, was inaugurated as well. And by 1934, a typhoid fever epidemic threatened the city. 1936, in March, it was the most disastrous flood in the city's history, swept through the city. 1937, Reuel Williams Athletic Field at Coney High School was dedicated. The Augusta Players was also organized as well in 1937. In 1938, in December, the Kennebec Pulp and Paper Company's sulfite plant and storehouses suffered a $500,000 fire damage, quite disastrous, as I mentioned earlier. 1939, construction of a $400,000 modern sulfite plant by the Kennebec Pulp and Paper Company was started. The first completed U.S. Airways communication station in Maine was placed in service at the Augusta Airport as well in this year. In 1940, we're at about 19,000 people in terms of total population. The annex to the post office was also started as well. In 1941, the National Guard to Camp Blanding for World War II service was incorporated. In 1942, the Military Police Battalion was stationed at Camp Keys, which is still here in Augusta today. 1943, the Augusta Planning Board was organized. By 1944, the Togus domicile for veterans was transferred. In 1945, Augusta celebrates the end of World War II with a large celebration. In 1947, the new bridge bill was passed. Augusta Parking District was also formed, and the city celebrates its 200 years of incorporation by 1947. And in 1949, the Memorial Bridge and rotaries were completed, a major part of the city today. That's the Big Green Bridge and those lovely, beautiful tar circles that we have in our city. By 1950, the population hits 20,000 folks, almost 21,000 folks. That's awesome. By 1955, the Maine Turnpike extends to Augusta. An off-ramp is built onto Western Avenue. I'm going to note this as the year that time started to change here in Augusta. As we have talked before on other episodes, Western Avenue used to be this big, beautiful avenue with big mansions and whatever, Victorian-era houses, and this was going to change for a lot of the city here with the incorporation of the turnpikes and the building of the malls, and so this is when these things start to kick off here. So pay attention here. This is where it gets interesting and really where Augusta changes for the modern, I guess you could say, in this aspect. So in 1956, Augusta Hardware Company moves from Water Street to a new store on the residential Western Avenue. By 1960, we're almost at 22,000 residents. 1961, the Augusta Plaza, the first shopping mall in the city, is completed on the site of the Haynes Estate, inaugurating the first major commercial development on Western Avenue. The first computers are also installed in City Hall. In 1964, the new federal building was built on Western Avenue. In 1965, the University of Maine at Augusta is established. Construction of the new wing of Coney High School is also completed as well. There's also the construction of the new Augusta General Hospital. And in 1966, construction begins on the Capitol Shopping Center on the site of the Gannett Estate. In 1968, the new district courthouse was built on the Rotary. Construction on the new state cultural buildings began as well. 50 residences are demolished in the process. 1969, the third shopping center, Turnpike Mall, opens. The first building on the UMA campus is completed as well. By 1970, we have a population of 21,000 folks. Population went back down a little bit in 1970. And so this is where I'm going to take a quick break from the timeline and talk about how Augusta shifted. As I noted, in the 1960s, we have basically the opening of 3 major malls. And so this is really what I'll note the death of downtown. While we have a vibrant downtown again today, it wasn't always like that. Augusta, Maine, it used to be known as, ooh, stay out of downtown. It's rough. Don't go down there after dark. It's, had a really bad reputation. And it came about because in the, as we hear in the 60s and 70s, they opened up malls and the businesses started moving out of downtown into these bigger malls. You had the opening of chain stores, getting away from smaller mom and pop shops, which are really key to the area. And again, as industry changed and as things went to China and globalized, it had a great profound effect on the city. And so as we're going to note here too, in the 1970s and beyond, the industry also starts to slow down in Augusta. And what I mean by that is the mills start to falter and shutter, and mills start to close, and jobs start to be lost. And so Augusta really gets a jolt to the face in a lot of ways, in the sense that its downtown communities are no longer, business is no longer being done in the downtowns. The downtown slowly starts to die off, with the exception of a handful of mom and pop shops and restaurant or two. Nothing like it is today by any means. And so again, this all comes about with the incorporation of the interstate. More people are eager to travel, and where are things going to pop up? As we hear, in the last section I read about the 60s, you have the opening of the interstate on Western Avenue, and additionally, all the businesses start moving up that way. And so that's where the malls were built. And, we have there's two major malls, on the way up Western Avenue, and then there's one over by, the Civic Center up that way, and that would come later. But that being said, we see the shift from the downtowns, the power being in the downtowns, the money being in the downtowns, to the money being in the malls and the other avenues where all the businesses have popped up and moved. So, like I said, they really follow the interstate in a lot of ways. In 1971, there was some more additions to the YMCA were completed. In 1972, Hudson Pulp and Paper changed to Statler Tissue. In 1973, the Augusta Civic Center was built at the Augusta's north end. Commercial development in the immediate area also ensues. 1974, the Augusta House was demolished, Taylor Shoe closes, and the state parking garage was built. As I say, we see industry starting to leave the area. Taylor Shoe closing as well in this year. So 1975, construction on the vocational technical school begins here in Augusta, CATC. And also to note, in 1976 was the last log drive. While the last logs came through Augusta in 1973, the last major log drive all the way from Moosehead to Scott Paper in Winslow occurred in this year. But again, Augusta saw its last logs in 1973. And again, that's another sign of times to come. The paper industry was losing a lot of its power, and again was moving away from sending logs down the river. And things changed a lot in the mid-'70s too, which I'm going to go into in a little bit of detail here, because it really set up a really unique event in Augusta that I want to note and talk about, which was the whatever race, the whatever festival, or whatever you want to call it. It was the whatever race though. And for those and this is where I'm going to kind of talk about the mills and the give and take with the mills. So, as I stated before, the mills use the river for power. They use the river to power all of their machines. They used it for electricity, for everything. And again, hydropower is great, but not at the environmental expense of an area. And so what I mean by that is that if you go and Google, or if you go look up Augusta, Maine, Augusta, Maine history, or Augusta, Maine Kennebec River history, or even just Augusta, Maine, odds are you're going to find something about how nasty and polluted the Kennebec River became because there was no environmental protection laws. The EPA, folks, wasn't created until Richard Nixon decided to sign it into existence in the 1970s, and that was in part by a guy by the name of Edmund Muskie. And so he was a senator that had a lot of power in this state, and I could do a whole episode just on him because of what a unique guy he was. He even ran for for president. But he was the major force behind the Clean Water Act of 1972, which was the beginning to the end of the nasty, nasty brown foamy water that was the Kennebec River. Again, it was literally a garbage cesspool that flowed down the middle of the town, and there were dead fish, and it stunk, and it was just a nasty, a nasty, nasty, nasty place, and it made you not even want to go downtown and enjoy, or even go downtown and walk around because of just how nasty the smell was. And so this is, since the river would eventually be cleaned up because of folks like Ed Muskie and the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency and all these other clean water pieces of legislation and the push to clean up watersheds and whatever else. So a group of Augusta residents were sitting around one New Year's Eve in the mid of the 1970s and came up with the idea of a race of celebrating the newly clean Kennebec River. This brainstorm is commemorated with a plaque on the east side boat landing, so it's still there today. And this is really where the idea of the whatever race came to be. And so folks would strap together pontoons and canoes and anything that could really float into rafts and float down the river from Augusta to Gardner. It came out of the counterculture and the hippies of the 1960s and 70s, and it was a free and easier time to do things. But these folks came together to really celebrate the uniqueness of this community and the natural wonder of the Kennebec River, and eventually, once it was able to actually be enjoyed, they took great revel in this, which was really unique. And I wish, I was around for this to see this event. And the sad thing is that I feel like we've gotten away from having fun in a lot of ways, and not just this area, but in this country in general. And, there can still be safe fun had. Something like this. This is an integral part of the Augusta culture and community as far as I'm concerned. You're telling me if we had a major float race or even canoe race or, something really wacky and cool like that, you're telling me people wouldn't show up in droves and the people who were involved in it in the 70s wouldn't come back? And so, I think this is a really unique and cool event that took place in Augusta. And look it up on I'll post some pictures of it, on social media too, if I can, find some good ones. It's just a really cool event. My dad was a part of it. I was, just before I came on to do this, I was asking him, what was it like? And he goes, well, there was alcohol involved and whatever else. But like I said, you can do things even with alcohol, even with a couple adult beverages involved, and it can still be done safely. Like I said, it takes a village to have a good culture and a good community. And so, if there's collective buy-in with things, it can happen and something could change. So I would really love to see the whatever race. They used to have the Whatever Family Festival, and that was great for the kids in Capitol Park and all that. It was really, kind of like if you're from New Hampshire, they have Old Home Days, or if you're from New England, we have Old Home Days, like where you celebrate the community. And like I said, Augusta's a really special place, and so a lot of folks said that this race would be too dangerous and whatever. But there are again, you can just get hit by a bus walking down the street. I'll use that old classic argument. And so I think that we need to bring, and again, if anybody in the Augusta, city council or any of the, local nonprofit community groups want to, get this going, reach out to me. I'd love to head it up. I'd love to, get involved with it, whether it be as a benefit for, a center like the the Colonial Theater, rather, in downtown Augusta, or, to benefit homeless children or to benefit veterans. I don't care, as long as we can bring it back to Augusta. And also help some people and have some goddamn fun doing it. Because like I said, this just sounds like a fantastic event. Maybe you don't go all the way down to Gardner. Maybe you only take it down to Hollowell, or you do it in different stages. Maybe you have a canoe race, and then you have, like a quote unquote raft race. There's ways of going about it, and we can be good to the fish, and we can, still have fun. And like I said, even if we have to have a volunteer beer can pickup day or something, all right, we'll make it happen, or have a beer garden tented off. I don't care. Like I said, there can be lots of fun. Oh, there's, and again, like a lot of these people, and maybe I'll even, change over as I get older and be more of a fogey, I guess. And I hate to, I'm not just trying to, make this sound like I have something against older folks or boomers, and I don't, again, I respect a lot of older folks. They have a lot of wisdom, and they've seen things and done things that I haven't done just because I haven't been on the earth as long. But that being said, though, we can't just suck all the fun out of everything. we got to have that spark, that joy. And again, maybe it's just because I'm 25 and, a little bit more resilient and reckless, but I really think that this is something that is integral, and I say integral, to the Augusta culture and community. It really, I think, exemplifies the fun that can be had, safely, mind you, the fun that can be had in this community. And so this kind of leads into, my next point here, or getting back to the timeline, I guess. In 1978, Down Street 82, a downtown revitalization effort begins. And so we see as Augusta changes, and again, as downtown really starts to fall by the wayside, you see efforts try and unfortunately fail in this instance, to rebuild the area and bring it back to its former glory. And unfortunately, by the time the 80s come around, things did not get a heck of a lot better for the Augusta economic sectors anyway. In 1981, manufacturing ends at the Edwards Mill. Lippman Poultry closes, facing rising heating costs. The Winthrop Universalist Church is also demolished in this year. 1982, Digital Equipments opens the new Augusta Business Park. Down Street 82 ends with little success. The revitalization group I talked about for downtown in the last entry, and the Capitol Theater was also demolished. In 1983, new zoning passes for the city. Water Street fire kills 4 people. So again, even in the 1980s, the fires still wouldn't leave Augusta alone. In 1986, construction begins on the new city center. The Key Plaza, the tallest building in Augusta, was also built on Water Street. That's the big-ass brick building that is smack dab in the middle of downtown. It looks like kind of inspired by something from maybe like the Empire State Building era, but just made out of bricks, like the 1930s Gothic vaulted ornate type of, facades and such. So it's a really unique building, in my opinion. And it stands out. You definitely notice it. But also in '86, you also have the historic restoration of Fort Western began. There was the Mill Street fire, kills 4, including 2 children. $10 million renovation of the Edwards Mill for offices, shops is proposed. And unfortunately, the proposal later dies due to the lack of funds. That is the huge Achilles heel of our area, is always the lack of funds, unfortunately. In 1989, Edwards Mill Company plant is destroyed by the spectacular fire, as I mentioned previously. In 1991, major new regional shopping center is proposed for Civic Center Drive. This is the last mall to come up in the Civic Center area, as I mentioned, north end of Augusta. So 1995, Statler Tissue finally closes, the last nail in the coffin there in terms of Augusta manufacturing. 1997, the city celebrates its bicentennial, making Augusta officially, as the name implies, 200 years old. So that city, is at least 200 years old anyway. Let's see here. In 1998, the Capitol Riverfront Improvement District is established. The restoration of the State House and reconstruction of State Office Building begins. In 1999, after 162 years, the Edwards Dam is removed to help restore fisheries. Huge event, really, in city history. It changed the whole water levels back to how they quote unquote used to be, and it really changed the whole view of the city. Like I said, I can still remember looking up the river and seeing the dams. It's kind of it's amazing. It really is how much it changed the area. Eventually, in 2006, the new Coney High School opens, and the new YMCA opens that year as well. Both still brand new institutions that are standing strong today. Like I said, I went to the new Coney High School, which is over on South Belfast Avenue, and have been a member of the YMCA. Over by the Augusta Police Department, over off the river, heading towards off State Street over that way, or Capitol Street. That being said, in 2000, and then into the early 2010s, and I call it the last 10 years, really, Augusta has changed a lot. In the sense we've seen, and this is where I really kind of want to get into some of my own personal stuff here, guys, is that we've seen almost a flip-flop of everything I just described to you, and I'll tell you guys what I mean by that here in just a second. Now, guys, in Augusta, the malls are all closing due to Amazon and due to the supply chain, and due to all the other things that have come around with modernization and online shopping and delivery and all these things. All the malls are closing and are empty now, a lot of them. and I think it presents a really unique opportunity for other instances, but I'll get into that in a second. But that being said, we see now a push to go back to downtown. Downtown is the happening spot in Augusta. Downtown Augusta wins awards now. I never thought in my lifetime I would see downtown Augusta be revitalized, and it is revitalized. Go down there, walk down there. You see families, you see young people going on dates, you see shopping, you see dining, you see dancing, you see, and more businesses are coming in. They just added the hideout, the wharf, a long time institution, down in the Hollowell areas, now has a location here in downtown Augusta. So like I said, downtown Augusta is definitely on the rise, and it's already in a good spot, but there's just, a few other things that can be done to really knock it into overdrive. And that, comes in part with the Colonial Theater being, revitalized. Again, this place had no electric lights, no water, no toilets, barely any seats up until recently, and yet they had an event there with a magician or a mind reader or something. I can't remember exactly what the event was now, but it was sold out just so people could get in the door and see the building. And it used to have this amazing facade on the front of the building with lights, screening now, and it would be an awesome arts performance center for the downtown area, and we need it. There were people that were against having arts and revitalization in downtown Augusta, which is foolish. I mean, we have a lot of, our area to thank, between the, their various business owners to thank, like Tobias Parkhurst and other various folks downtown, with the Kushnock Pizza, Kushnock Brewing. They've been a fantastic community force. Obviously, coming out of the Oaks and Parkhurst Glass Company there, another major Augusta institution up on Capitol Street. And there's just been a lot of time and effort put into the downtowns. You have Galant Therapy Services down there. The Pouliot Real Estate folks are down there in downtown. You have a lot of really unique community other spots. State Lunch, another fantastic eatery. Downtown Diner, I can't forget those guys. They're awesome. That's one of my favorite breakfast spots now. Lisa's Legit Burritos even has a location downtown, which is fantastic. Go there over Chipotle, folks. All right, keep the money in the community, and that's what really is the push. Is like a lot of people are trying to keep things in the community, and like I said, I'd love to do more downtown. I'd love to get involved, more down there and really help that area. And I have a lot of I've been other places and seen how other folks do things, and I'd like to, bring some other ideas to the downtown area. And again, as I said before, we're moving away from the malls. The malls are dead, folks, if you couldn't tell, and I don't really think they're coming back, to be honest with you. Malls are dying. People want a more intimate community experience, and, I can't blame them. I do too. I hate going shopping in big malls and stuff like that. I'd rather go into a little shop, even if it costs more. Who cares? As long as, I'm supporting the community. Oh, and also another great spot, Wrapped Up Coffee House downtown Augusta. There's some great folks there. Check them out, too. Tom Finn's Shoe, cobbler, one of the 7 cobblers in the state. Another guy who's a Skowhegan original like myself. They're the Lacasse family. Fantastic group of folks. Making shoes, keeping people in footwear, and a very rare industry that's not really around these days. Literally a shoe cobbler, making shoes and working on leather, and that's a lost art form. Go check him out downtown as well. And there's a lot of other. I'm sure I'm missing a couple businesses, the Whiskey Kitchen, and there's so many. Riverfront Barbecue. Like I said, there's so many good places down there, and like I said, you go to downtown Augusta, you really can't go wrong. And I'll have to do my, my top 10 favorite, eateries in Augusta or something like that, or in the area list, because, like I said, we are really blessed, to have so many really cool and unique small businesses, really. And so that's really where Augusta is today. I'll call it from 2010 to the present, the last 12, 13-ish years, has really been Augusta in the modern revitalization. It's, where do we want to go? Do we want to be a real commercial hub? With malls and that stuff? Well, that's died down a little bit, and now we're focusing back on our downtown and focusing on the things that make Augusta, and bringing in more business. And again, it's the biggest thing now is bringing in more businesses and trying to create more prosperity, whether that comes as, revitalizing finally, the city or the state or whomever needs to finally just pull a finger out of somebody's ass and get like the Kennebec Arsenal fixed up. And that's a great area that could be used for a lot of different prosperity and economic development, and the scumbag guy who owns that just doesn't wants to sit there and not do anything, revitalize it, take it away from him. All right, we need to, I'm not just saying, oh, government's coming in and seizing your property, but if these people aren't willing, if they just want to sit there and let these places fall into disarray, that doesn't build good community. Let's get some people in here who want to build good community, and so that requires, a group effort by, perhaps our city government. And other folks like that, and other community organizations to get involved and just say enough's enough. We need to do things. And again, another big need in this area is affordable housing. Maybe we need to do some rezoning of some of these malls and turn them into like living shopping communities because, again, these malls are huge, massive open spaces, folks. Build some walls, make some apartments, build some condos inside. Again, you're going to have to rezone. You're going to have to do things. People are going to have to want to play ball. But there's a lot of money to be made, for you folks that are more money motivated. There's a lot of money to be made. Building construction, employment, affordable, decent housing for people, for the state workers, for the people who work and live and who want good. Again, that's another huge problem is actually affordable housing, decent housing, not Section 8, not people who are just going to sit there, and there are a lot of folks like this out there in the landlord world who sit there and just collect a goddamn check from the government and provide shitholes. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, you can say, oh, the tenants, blah, 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 blah. But again, you put into something what you get out of it at the same time. So I don't know. Like I said, I'm just kind of spewing here towards the end. But the fact of the matter being is there's a lot that needs to still be done. And I just feel like we need to put our noses down and we can really build this area into something special because it's worth building back up, as I think I've noted in this last couple episodes, this two-parter on something, an area I care so deeply about. And again, it's not a person, like you can't put a face to it or whatever and say, like Augusta, and look at it and say, I care about you. But I really do care about this area, and I really want to see this area prosper. And so, if anybody's listening that, sitting on the board of like the Colonial Theater or anything like that, like I said, please reach out to me. I'd love to get more involved. Like I said, I'm already on the CARA board, and that's another major, community organization that came about, with 45 years of experience. That's what, things like that is what makes Augusta special. And so we want to make sure we keep those things around for the future. So that being said, guys, that wraps up Augusta, Maine, part 2. So, going to call to the end of the Augusta, Maine series here. I hope you guys like these little episodes here, trying to just change things up a little bit here. But in the next couple weeks here, I'll be back with a brand new episode, joined by guests. There's going to be some good guests on this summer. I'm really excited about where things have been. We're over a year in corporation, so only good things to come here. I'm planning on doing a few little unique things here, so definitely be on the lookout and keep an eye out, guys. Like I said, we're just getting started here, and so hopefully some really good things to come in the next year here for the DuView podcast and for myself in general. So that being said, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Keep up to date with all of the DuView goodness on social media, the DuView podcast on all your listening platforms, and of course, DuView207 on Instagram. Follow us there for my Grateful Sunday series where I highlight some of my favorite Grateful Dead tracks. That's every Sunday morning. You can tune in anywhere from, it'll be up there for 24 hours. It's in the story. You can go back and check out the previous weeks. I think we're going to be on like week 73 or 74 now. Like I said, guys, I'm a Deadhead and I really love their music. So, if you also find joy in some of that stuff or just curious to find out more about what I got going on, like I said, guys, Instagram is a little bit more personal of a place for me. I don't mind Facebook, but again, I just like the creation tools and stuff on Instagram a little bit better. So I will still obviously, keep up a presence on Facebook and everything like that. But, Instagram's really my favorite platform to reach out to you guys. So that being said, guys, again, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll be back here in another couple weeks with an all brand new episode. We're taking it back to music, guys. We're getting a musician on. We haven't had enough of those on, so we're going to be talking music next week, so get excited there. There's the biggest tidbit I'll give you guys. So have a great couple weeks, guys, and we'll see you in the next episode.